It's been a given now for some time that Manuel Lanzini is probably in his last season at West Ham. Although West Ham have an option to trigger an extension to his contract, that is understood. I think that they are going to part ways with Lanzini. I think the player wants it. I think the club are not too bothered about the situation. He's on a higher wage. One thing I was going to ask you, mate, was regarding Lanzini and his performance recently. He was playing in our recent Europa Conference League game at home. The game we won 4-0, which was excellent. But the thing was, I noticed about Lanzini, he actually played really well. He was really influential throughout the game and made me sort of feel like, are we shooting ourselves in the foot here? Are we sort of writing off a player and saying, yeah, he's done? When arguably, especially in a season where we've been so bloody poor, has he not got more to offer West Ham? Are we, as I've said, shooting ourselves in the foot? What's your feelings on Lanzini? Are you someone that you would be happy to see go at the end of the season? Or do you think, hang on, we should be looking to retain for longer?
I mean, it's probably his time to go, really. I'm a massive fan of Lanzini. When he first played for the club, I thought, honestly, he was up there with Payet. I think a lot of people actually do forget how good he was just because, Payet kind of overshadowed him with how good he was. But I mean, Lanzini's first season, he was absolutely magical in that number 10 role. And, whether things have gone different, if he didn't get that big injury at the Argentina squad, you had big clubs sniffing around him. Whether things had played out differently, I don't know. But at this current time, he doesn't really work as a 10. But, as an 8, I think he's really, really good. You've got sort of Fornals who can play that role. You've got Lanzini who can play that role. Paqueta can play that role. There have been times this season where Paqueta's been injured, and rather than have another player in that kind of 8 pivot with Rice, Moyes has opted to chuck Souček in there, which just hasn't worked ever. So for me, I think I like Lanzini as that kind of option. If we're going to get European football next season, he's a good kind of utility player to have. Last season, he really impressed me with his transition from just being an attacking player to a player who was going to get back and put tackles in. I think his defensive side of the game was something that I hadn't really seen before, and he really impressed me last season. But he does kind of seem like he's on the fringe at the moment, and I'm struggling to come up with names that he would get ahead of in the team sheet if the team's 100% fit. So probably for me, I think he's had his time at West Ham. He's been here 7 years now.
Yeah, it's around that. Yeah, 2015, I think he came, wasn't it? Around that time.
Yeah, so around 7 or 8 years. I think probably he wants to go home to Argentina, play some football in his home country, or maybe potentially have a go at the Premier League again. But for me, it'd be sad to see him go. But I think probably is about his time to go.
See, no, I would agree with that. I usually would say, yeah, because I have felt that way for quite some time. The only gripe I have now is the fact that when he puts in a performance like that. Now, I understand that he was, in terms of the European competition, isn't quite up there with the Premier League standards. So I do understand that. But you do look at him perform in those games sometimes and think, should he have more of a role in the first team? Are we holding him back for some reason? I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate that he has been given opportunities previously. He hasn't really done it. But I was really impressed with him the last couple of weeks when he's been called upon. I thought he's very, very good. And not only, as you say, the work rate he puts in and getting back and doing the dirty side of the game, he also does he's very creative still. He's still got a lot to offer. I do see where you're coming from, though. I do understand that you kind of look at his age now and how long he's been at the club, and it's probably the right time for him now to be moving on. But I suppose the other big question is, has he got a role to play in West Ham's fight for survival? I mean, would he get ahead of Paqueta? Probably not. That's a really tough one. I can't see that happening. But there's certainly arguments to be said that could he be playing a number 10 role? Could he be playing behind the striker? Could he come in, replace Thomas Souček, for instance? I mean, he was very. All I'm saying is I was very impressed with him. I was watching this game thinking this is a little bit like seeing Lanzini of old. Really, really, he put in a very good shift, and it did make me wonder whether there is more we can get from him this season. I mean, he's from his side of things, the personal, his personal life. His missus had tweeted or put something on Instagram saying that he was really frustrated, and he should be getting basically more first team football. And on that performance, in the Europa Conference, has he got a point? Should he be more involved? Do you think he's still got a role to play this season in the Premier League?
Well, I mean, we're probably going to stick with the sort of 4-3-3 thing we've got going on right now. And if Paqueta's fit, he starts, and if Rice fits, he starts. So then you make an argument. Well, you've got Souček playing as this kind of shadow striker, almost with Ings playing off him at times. Is that what you do? Do you stick with Souček? Because for me, I don't think a number 10 really works behind Danny Ings. I think he needs to occupy that space, and same as Scamacca. I think he needs to drop into the pockets that a number 10 would occupy, and therefore you need someone maybe like Souček who's going to ghost into the box, or someone like Paqueta who's going to sort of maybe even pull off Scamacca and make a big run forward. Like we've seen in the past. So for me, a number 10 doesn't really suit the players that we've got at the moment. If you had an Antonio, for instance, a number 10 would work perfectly, because he'd be running forward, he'd be able to hold onto the ball, and if he turns into danger, he'd be able to play it into Lanzini, and then we can see where we go from there. But for me, with Ings and Scamacca, I just don't see a need for a number 10 in the team. Okay. So then I think who's going to fit that third midfield role perfectly? I think I'd have probably Flynn Downs over Lanzini at the moment, just with how comfortable he is on the ball. He'd add extra support. He also got, I think Rice would allow Rice to go forward a little bit more, allow Paqueta the freedom. Maybe even Fornals, I think, would be a really good 8. So you've got, quite a few players who could fill that Lanzini role. So for me, obviously he's got a role to play, but in terms of the first team, I just don't really see where he fits in. I might put Lanzini ahead of Fornals in the number 8 role, simply just because I've seen him play it quite a few times, and I think he does. Fornals does play quite well off the left, so it'd be good to have him as an option there. But now that we're starting to get the full sort of squad in, I just don't really think he's got sort of a place in the first team at the moment. If he comes off the bench and Antonio comes on, and we want to try something different, why not chuck him on? He can play on the wing. He can play at the number 10. He's still got a lot of skills. He's really, really comfortable on the ball, really good at driving the ball forward. Paqueta's, for me, I'm not convinced with his injury record. So, if he does come off, I'd love to see Lanzini in that role. But for me, I just kind of think he's not really got a role that fits him in this team at the moment. It's probably just about his time to leave, unfortunately.
And it will be. And I'll tell you what, when he does depart, which as we're saying here, it's looking likely. That's looking the most likely scenario. It's going to be quite an emotional one, really, because obviously, as you say, Lanzini's been at the club now for 7-8 seasons, and then on top of that, one of our players that were at the Boleyn. There's not many left now. I think Antonio, Lanzini. I struggle to think of any more now that are playing this squad. Creswell.
Was Fabianski, or was that a later one? That's a later one, I believe, isn't it?
Possibly, I think it might have been a later one, wouldn't it, Fabianski? I think it was. It was later because we had Adrian in goal. I think for the
of course
final season. So it's quite sad. So it's a player that sort of holds on to that memory of Upton Park will be going. So, I mean, that's I'm assuming that he does go, but I mean. Like you say, though, even as an impact sub, or someone that can come in, should an injury happen, as you said, to someone like Paqueta, you do get the feeling Lanzini still has a job that he can do for the club. And let's hope that he can do that until the end of the season. And it's going to be a very sad farewell when he does depart, if he does.